Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the studios of Grafton Community Television, located at 26 Providence Road. This is Meet the Candidate. I'm your host, Bob DeToma. My guest in studio is Craig Juelis. He is running again for school committee, and thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. When we last met you, we talked about your life in general and your goals and aspirations of running for school committee. And let's give an update to the viewers at home. A little bit about your bio, give us a thumbnail sketch, and what exactly you hope to accomplish if you're elected.
Yeah. So my wife and I live here in Grafton. I'm a transplant. I grew up in New Jersey. My wife grew up here over where Stony Brook is now. We have two kids, and I should clarify that this year, I guess there was some confusion last year. I have a junior in high school, Emma, and I have an 8th grader who's 14 named Ian at the middle school. So both are engaged town sports. They play club sports. Next year, Ian will hopefully be in high school sports like his sister. Moving here is, growing up, 12 miles outside of New York City. Here it's like living in the country, a little small town. It's quiet, it's peaceful. And when we decided where to settle down, there really wasn't a debate on that. In terms of running for school committee again this year, as I mentioned last year, I'm really focused of applying and overlaying my experience of 22 years as a classroom teacher, an administrator, to really help improve not only for my own two kids, but for all the students in Grafton, to ensure that when they leave our schools, they have the skills that they can apply to many different settings, whether it's college, the private sector, trades, anywhere in life. For no matter what job they may encounter, they're going to have the necessary skills to be successful in all walks of life.
So because we edit a lot of video here, I have seen you attending a number of school committee meetings. Mm-hmm. And I seem to recall that one of the things that you were concerned about or had brought up in conversation before the committee was the way students kind of forgot how to learn over the course of the lockdown, and some skills were lost, and some study disciplines, and you were truly concerned about it. What were some of the questions that you asked so the people at home who may not have watched those meetings have an idea what you're looking for?
So in a normal school year, as my experience as a high school principal, you have a 4-year program of studies, and you have prerequisites which are based on successfully completing the course ahead of you. And in a normal, even before COVID, taking math, and it seems I always pick on math, but someone once told me it's ruthlessly cumulative in its process. But in a normal school year prior to COVID, in a math class, the prerequisite is based on the prior year. So you had to be very in tune with how even something in terms of common planning can impact if you have two different teachers teaching the same subject. If you have a combination of underclassmen, say freshmen and sophomores, maybe a blend of juniors, how that could impact the pacing of the class. Because as the students progress to the next level, there may be gaps in the instruction which impact the success of the following year to introduce new curriculum. With the COVID closure and then the reopening with the hybrid model and kids learning at home, kids learning in school part-time, I don't think it was a loss of study skills to the degree where they forgot to do things. I think it more was there was this global shift, which then forced students to be doing things at home, doing things in school twice a week, maybe, and depending on the plan that was chosen, either 4 days a week, 2 days a week, or completely remote. For me, as I watch my students progress, my concern, again, going back to math, is, as students progress to those higher levels, it seems to me that, something comes up, oh yeah, you didn't cover this, when was this covered? It was covered in 8th grade. So now our students are at a disadvantage in terms of having those gaps in their foundational knowledge as they move forward, and how does that impact as you get to the higher levels of, like, the high school curriculum in terms of the offerings. No different if you think of students who miss, like, reading instruction. My two nephews down in Philadelphia, my brother and my sister-in-law chose to send them to a school that was in session rather than being remote, simply because of their ages and being in school to learn, as they started to learn how to read and write. So I think my concern is, over these past 2 years, they've heard that these exist. I'm sure they have kids that might be in the district, so they're experiencing this firsthand, but yet it was never a concern that was brought up. There was no sense of pause to, maybe we should really focus on this. And again, as we've talked to teachers in parent conferences, it comes up, they address it as opposed to not a full stop, but maybe let's pause some things, focus on what needs to be done so the students are not repeating these gaps year after year. And I think the term that was used was hopefully we'll have these addressed in the next 2 years. Well, in 2 years, my 2 students are out of school, especially my older one's out of school, and my other one's going to be almost a junior. So we've missed an opportunity to really address these things and to ensure that they're closed and then track their progress over time.
So it's almost like you miss a day of school, but this is magnified tenfold or 100-fold.
Yeah, I think it's something where, despite everyone's best efforts, and we were doing it in my last building with the hybrid model, and we had an academy outside of school, you were still dealing with, a difference in learning, a difference in how we instruct our students, how we assess our students, in addition to all the stressors that were going on with our staff, with our students in terms of, we're coming out of that, I think it was 4 months, that May 13th was the last day of school, and then we were shut down. I think all those different things came into play and kind of, you had these distractions, if you're focusing on the stress, how can you focus on the academics, and all those different things were coming into play. And I think it's just something, as you said, it just magnified what was going on. And I don't think that's anyone's fault. I think in terms of looking at that, how did we respond to that? And if you know that students are struggling, then there should have been something in terms of like, we need to address this.
So when you brought these concerns to the school committee, how did you think your questions were received?
How do I think they were received? It's hard to tell. I mean, public comment, they're not supposed to respond. They're not supposed to fall back, and it's not a conversation. They do it at the start of a meeting, which in some cases you can't talk about what was discussed in the prior part of the meeting. My student sits on the high school student council or school council that meets with the school committee, and they know it's a situation, they know it's an issue. I don't know how it was received. The people that I talk to, they're dealing with the same things with their own students at home. And
but if you were a poker player and you were reading the faces in the room, even an inexperienced card player might still be able to get a sense, right or wrong, they're going to come up with an opinion. But
I can look at people and read them, but I didn't get a response from any of them, verbally, non-verbally, which again, is watching different meetings, whether it's even the select board meeting, there's not always that non-verbal response. There certainly wasn't a verbal response.
Yeah. How did your children come out at the other end of the pandemic? How are they doing? How are they dealing with everything?
I think the academic stress of, my son, not so much, with my daughter being in high school and having those gaps, and the frustration of trying to address those gaps with her teachers on her own, I think that's been a struggle. We all have stress going through high school. You have stress if you're an AP student, you're playing 2 sports, you're engaged in these activities outside of school, National Honor Society. I think the fact that I think she may be to a degree frustrated that it's now, that was 8th grade for her. So figure at least 10th grade and 11th grade. And how that may impact in terms of her course selections, in terms of moving forward and trying to get to she wants to keep progressing forward. My concern would be for the student who may not be successful in school. You have the students at the higher levels of the course, the program of studies, but what about the students who traditionally struggle in school? Where are they right now? They may have struggled in traditional school prior to the closure. You come out of the closure, now they have these gaps. How else is that kind of presenting itself for these students, and what is being done to help those students as well as my own?
So would it be fair to say you have a concern that the gifted students get a good portion of the attention and the less motivated students are overlooked or underserved?
No, not at all. My concern would be, the same for the students who are want to pursue those higher levels. There are gaps in knowledge, not being addressed. The same as a student who may, and I was one of those students who struggled specifically with math and science. I would, I think, whether it's the student at the, the AP level the student who's at the CP level, if you're talking high school courses, or the student who might be in an inclusion class at a different level. I think the importance needs to be focused on all those students and where they are, what their gaps are, what their strengths are, and how to use those to close those gaps on a permanent basis to allow them all to be successful as they progress through the school system, and not just simply, oh, this came up last year, we'll address it again, came up. So I think the focus needs to be on all students. Public schools, in all the years I've worked in them, whoever walks through that door as a student, you have to work with them, regardless of what town I was in, what state I was in, what my role was within a building. And you have to ensure that all those students progress. When they come in September and then they leave in June, the goal is to have them be better than they were in September. So when they reach that next level, they can be successful at that next level. And for the students who struggle in school, I think the idea in terms of having them have, whether it's a paraprofessional, a classroom teacher, a special education teacher, really help them with compensatory skills, help them internalize those skills, so then it becomes more they know what to do when they're presented with this situation. So as they get to be older, grade level and age-wise, they internalize those different skills, so then they can become more independent, and in that independence, achieve some level of success.
Mm. At the conclusion of your last run for school committee, did you know right away you were going to rerun if you didn't make
Yes.
it? Instantly.
Yep. I don't think we'd actually pulled out of the parking lot here, and we had.
And already had plans made.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Interesting. All right. Is there anything that you want to touch on or address before I turn you over to the voters in town?
No, I mean, I think for me, it's really focusing on all the students that we have in Grafton. I think in terms of myself, I'm here doing this certainly for my own two children, but for all the students that are in Grafton. I'm not really saying I'm doing this because I saw a need and just chose to kind of independently run for this. Last year, and the same thing this year. I think there are some ways in which I can bring my experiences, being at all these different levels, doing curriculum revision, doing school safety planning, right after, actually in the weeks leading up to Sandy Hook, and then certainly afterwards. And all those different roles, whether it was a NEASC review, working with MTEL, which was the licensing tests for the state, all those different experiences to how we can move our students forward, and certainly look to make our schools even better.
Okay. I'll let you address the voters. That camera over there represents the people at home.
Hi, voters at home. Craig Juelis, I'm running for school committee this year. I'd certainly appreciate your vote on May 16th. Certainly go over to my Facebook page, Craig Juelis for School Committee. Please keep an eye out for any future upcoming events. We'd love to have people come down, ask questions. You can certainly reach out to me through that Facebook page, and I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you about your questions, your concerns, and moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming in. I appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. My guest in studio this evening has been Craig Juelis. He's running for the seat on school committee. On behalf of all of the talented people that work here at Grafton Community Television, thank you for watching. I'm Bob DeToma.